Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the DISCY Chicks. Martha is not with us today. It is the holidays, but I do have a special guest this time. So we're in season 5 of the DISCY Chicks, and it's my pleasure to welcome Amanda Moser, who is a client of mine. And Amanda has done a wonderful job putting DISC into her company and using it the way it's supposed to be used. I think we're going to find out at least. But welcome, Amanda. Welcome to the show.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yeah. So this will just be a conversation. Well, I would love to hear, how your company is using DISC, but let's start just a little bit about you. Just a little bit of background, like where are you from and when did you first get exposed to DISC? So those two things, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from Northeast Missouri. That's where I live now. I grew up on a farm outside of a small town. So that is a huge part of who I am, is this really rural, small town kid. And I went to college at Missouri State in Springfield. I've lived in Kansas City. I've lived in St. Louis. I've lived in North and South Missouri. So I'm a real Missourian through and through. I first got exposed to DISC, I think for the first time when I worked for a youth development nonprofit in Kansas City called Youth Volunteer Corps. Our executive director there used it with our fairly small team. We always had a team of between 5 and 10, used it annually during our strategic planning sessions. And it was a way for us to do team building and professional development, personal development, because we were a small team and worked so closely together. And I think because in a nonprofit space, you don't have a ton of resources, you don't have a ton of financial resources, your people resources become that much more important. And so I think it was a tool to really maximize our people resources, to really make sure that our team was working together effectively and efficiently, because that was sort of where our spend was in our people. So she used it every year. She always made it really fun and really interesting. And so when I got the chance to use it and be a part of it at Next Move, I got really excited because I love stuff like that. I love personality assessments. I love all kinds of them. I did the Myers-Briggs early in my career. I've gotten into Enneagram. I know everything about my zodiac. So anything that tells me about me, I love. So the DISC fits right into that sort of slot in my preferences and my personality too.
If nothing else, you're self-aware, correct?
Yes, yes.
So when you were first using it at in that youth development center with your team, what was a takeaway from you? You said that your leader used it in several different ways. How did it help you communicate better? Did it help you with people who are different than you, or kind of give some explanation for why that person kind of drives you crazy, or what?
Yeah, the thing that it made the most difference for me was working with my colleagues more effectively, and particularly my counterpart in the program department. So I helped run and support youth programming, and I had a colleague who was high C. So I'm high I, she was high C, and we worked so closely together. And so having that knowledge of how she worked, particularly how I drove her nuts, but she was kind enough not to say so. The ways in which I overwhelmed her, I think, was really important to me, particularly as a high I who wants to be liked and wants to make other people feel good. It was nice to know the ways in which I might not be doing that. But I think my biggest takeaway, and the thing that I always emphasize when I am facilitating DISC training at Next Move, is the way in which the folks who are different from you are your greatest resources.
Yes.
I touch on very briefly, you can think of these as your sources of greatest conflict, but I always say the invitation is to think about these folks as your best resource. So I always share that Leah is the name of the person who was my counterpart at YVC. I didn't put out any work that had any level of importance without Leah's eyes on it. When I had to present to our board, when I was preparing a training, when I was getting ready to present at a conference, I always sat down with Leah and asked, what am I missing? What are the questions that I'm not asking? What have I not factored in terms of the detail or the timing or the resources that this is going to take? And it always was better as a result. And she and I worked really well together. She's one of my closest friends now. And having that information in our workplace, I think, really brought us closely together and allowed us to improve our work product as a result, which was really meaningful.
I'm showing your disc on the screen now. So as we walk through it, if we look at the natural style, which is where we always start, is Amanda's a super high I, so 94, and look at that C is a 15. And I was joking with Amanda right before the show that I said, gosh, you fit right in with Martha and me, because Martha and I combined don't even have 15. So you're like a high C to us, right?
Imagine.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's natural for a high I who wants to be liked. If you're getting some, quietness or pushback from a C, it means you need to try harder. And that's exactly the opposite of what they want, right? You need to tailor your approach to maybe a softer, quieter
Yes.
approach. All right, I'm going to figure out how to stop sharing, but thanks for letting us share that.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, well, Amanda fits right in with our group.
Yep.
It's not afraid to wing it. Okay, so you mentioned Next Move, and that's where I met you. Next Move is a really interesting company. I learned a lot about your industry, but explain to our millions of fans what Next Move does, who you hire, and just the general purpose of this company.
Yeah. So Next Move is a healthcare staffing agency, and we specialize in travel nurses. We work with a lot of RNs, and we are starting to work with more allied clinicians, those respiratory therapists, surge techs, things like that, really kind of rounding out the hospital setting. Most folks probably heard of travel nursing for the first time because of COVID. With nursing shortages and the demand on hospitals, travel nurses became a really important resource for our healthcare system. And so our organization is just a few years old, and we really came of age during COVID. It was a really interesting season to be building a business and creating processes and developing a staff. So we're essentially a sales organization. Our team, our internal team, is made up of recruiters who help match and support our clinicians while they're on these temporary assignments. We have account managers who work with our hospital facilities, and then we have this operations team. So we have a compliance team that helps get our clinicians fully onboarded, make sure they have all their certifications, tests, all of the hospital HR side. Our compliance team does that. We have a payroll team and a finance team, marketing, human resources, IT. So we have these really dynamic sales folks who work out with people. And then we have our operations team as well. We have an amazing leadership team. I mean, the reason that my job even exists and that we do so much with the DISC is because of the support of our executive leaders who really believe that culture and people are sort of our secret sauce and how we do things. So that's what Next Move is. That's what Next Move does.
So you're a matchmaker between nurses. So if you will, just walk us through a typical engagement for a nurse. I'm a nurse. I sign up. What should I expect? Like, what's a typical nurse? Where do they go and what do they do?
Yeah. So if you're a travel nurse, or if you're a nurse who's thinking about traveling, you're doing a lot of research, you're trying to find things out. Typically, you're going to be engaging with several different agencies at one time, trying to find the right fit for you. It might be that you're trying to find the right fit in terms of the job itself. So, I'm a ICU RN and I want to work in Florida in January because I'm from Missouri and it's freezing. And I work day shifts. I want to work 4 days a week and I want to make, X amount of dollars. So those are probably going to be your main criteria. You're looking for things, but several different agencies may have positions that fit. And so from that point, you're probably looking for, well, who do I like working with? Who do I I feel like is honest with me and transparent, who makes me feel like they have credibility and I can ask questions and they're responsive. So they'll reach out to us. Occasionally we'll reach out to them. Facebook and social media have become huge opportunities for recruiting and for nurses to get information, to share information, for recruiters to kind of capture those opportunities. And then once they decide to start working with a recruiter, the recruiter is sharing options with them. We have this position in Miami, we have this position in Orlando. This one makes this much. They work together to put together a really competitive application. And then the recruiter is really sort of their chaperone through that whole process. They're answering questions that they have, they're giving additional information, and the recruiter really remains in that chaperone support position throughout their entire contract, particularly at Next Move, where we put that clinician experience out front and center. We think of ourselves as a nurse first agency, a clinician first agency.
Okay.
What they need and what they want is right at the center of every decision that we make. We want our clinicians to be raving fans of Next Move. We want them to fall in love with our agency and feel really loyal to us. So that relation piece is really important. Consequently, almost everyone at Next Move has high I or high S in their DISC profile. It's nuts. We are such a relational organization, and really every travel healthcare staffing agency, a recruiting relationship is relationship focused. And so that's how we try to distinguish ourselves, do it a little bit different. DISC is a tool that we use to distinguish that, but it also just, you can just see it when you look at our team wheel. People are really, really relational here. Even our finance folks are high teamwork, high relationship, our IT folks. So it just, it's very prevalent at Next Move. People are really important to us, and it affects everything that we do. So that clinician journey, we're really looking at what opportunities do we have to make these really important healthcare providers feel really special, feel really appreciated, respected. I think
They've
that's
got somebody on their team, it sounds like.
Exactly. Because you, as a travel clinician, you are lifting up out of a predictable work environment and dropping into a place that you've probably never been before, with people you don't know, exercising new clinical skills, working with new patient populations, and doing all of that away from home and potentially away from your support system. So that's what we try to do, is really step in and be that support system, particularly for our workplaces, where no matter what your profession is, we're all spending most of our time, most of our day at work. So we want that to be an enjoyable experience.
What's the typical length of stay for a travel nurse? Is there, like, do they become permanent and stay? Is that the goal? Or is it more they want to just, they know it's temporary and they want to just move around and see different things?
It depends. It's usually temporary. The standard contract is 13 weeks. So nurses spend about 3 months at a particular location. They very often extend in those contracts. So it's not uncommon for our nurses, at least, to be at a facility for a year. They usually take a break in between if they want to continue to extend, but you can also do one contract somewhere and travel to a new state, city, location. We work with
seasonal
a lot of
winter, and you have your summer contract.
Exactly. Yeah, we get a lot of folks who want to be somewhere warm in the wintertime. Folks take breaks between their contracts and the holidays. That's really common as well. We also have a lot of local travelers. This was new to me as somebody who was not familiar with the industry before I joined Next Move. Local travelers are folks who live within 50 miles of their facility. That's also a really common way to do travel. It's still a temporary contract. You're still a contingent worker, but you're not going from New York City to LA, for example, or Missouri to, Florida. You're just a few miles from home, but you still have some of the same perks that come with travel, particularly the self-control that you get. You get a lot of agency, a lot of self-determination in a travel workplace. And so a lot of our folks go for that, for those perks as well.
For the non-committal, they can drop in, try it out, drop back out. I love it.
Right.
Well, let's talk about Next Move and how you use DISC. So what's the first exposure to DISC that an employee might have?
Yeah, we drop folks into this pretty much right away. They get the most exposure to it at the very beginning. So I schedule a basically training and facilitation during their onboarding phase, usually within the first week or 2 weeks of their employment with Next Move. We ask them to complete the assessment before their first day. Those results come to me. And then we get together for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the size of the group, and go through their profiles and talk about it. I like to do this with a group of folks. I think it's more fun and easier that way. So we usually have between 3 to maybe 5 or 6 folks at a time within our new hiring classes.
Yeah.
And so they get those results right away. We talk about what it means for them individually and kind of call some things out. We talk about what it means within the larger team and that dynamic and how that plays in. And then as they leave their orientation, I leave them with a few tools. I always send them with a comparison report between them and their supervisor. And if they are coming into a supervisory role, them and anybody that is going to be working on their team.
Will you talk a little bit more about the comparison report? Because Martha and I don't talk a lot about that. We mention it, but I've looked in your account and you have like columns and columns of
Yes.
comparison reports, which I love. So
Yes.
do you
Everybody
go
gets
over that with
report.
both people or just the bird that's leaving the nest?
Yeah, I don't. I send it to them as a tool. A lot of the ways that we use the disc is to say, this is a tool for you. It's really up to you to leverage it. Some folks do, some folks don't as much, but I always make sure they have one with their supervisor and try to set up during the training the way in which that would be beneficial to them in terms of being an effective communicator, being able to resolve conflict, being able to make requests and get resources effectively from their supervisor. If they are a manager, how to motivate and energize and provide support to the folks that they're working with. I also really encourage our team to use it for their colleagues as well. And I always tease them. I'm like, you can ask me, I won't tell this person that I'm generating a comparison report for you. But I had somebody a few weeks ago who was like, I'm having a hard time connecting with this person. I want to, not surprisingly, this person is really high I. They're like, I really want to be connected to them. How do I do this? Can I please get a comparison report? And we talked it through. I gave him some input and shared, and he was like, I found this super helpful, really effective, particularly for people who want to have good relationships at work. I think this is a tool that can be really helpful. And I think just having it, the report itself is so comprehensive. I mean, it's 40 pages of information. Not everybody's going to go in and even read it about themselves. I don't know how many of our high D folks have ever read every page of this, probably. I pour over it like, twice a year or 3 times a year. But particularly if you want to know about somebody else, the likelihood that you're going to read through their full report is pretty low. So that comparison report pulls out that salient information, the stuff that's going to have the most impact. It's just a couple of pages. You see the two of you right next to each other. I think it's just such a brilliant tool. We're so glad to have it.
Yeah, it's a great tool, just a side by side, especially when there's one that has like one D going up and the other one, right next to it going down. And if everything is going in opposite directions, very telling on what to expect.
And again, for me, it's all about framing. I think that's such an important thing as a DISC facilitator. It feels like a responsibility that I have in being the person who's introducing this to them. It is the framing. Like, this isn't a person that you're going to fight with. This doesn't have to be a person who annoys you or frustrates you. This can be a person who's a huge resource to you. And it's about how you choose to look at that person. I often start with saying, like, this is a way in which you can look at the people around you and stop assuming that they're wrong. Stop assuming that there's something wrong with them or that they're just dumb, which is sometimes where my brain goes, like, this person
is annoying. Yes.
Annoying or wrong or whatever. That is one of the things I love so much about the DISC and the driving forces sort of as a tool together, is that it's not about right, wrong, good or bad. It's about, particularly in a workplace, what kind of results do you want to get at work and in your relationships, and is how you're approaching things getting you those results? If it is, great, keep on. But if it's not, here's some information so that you can pivot, maybe try a different way and have a different outcome as a result of that.
I have a colleague who teaches disc as well, and the way that she introduces it is that, it's kind of human nature to avoid people who are different than you or annoy you, or just, they have a totally different style. But they're probably doing the work that you don't want to do. And if you can ignore, that 10% that drives you crazy and really match up with the things that complement you. And I think you're right. You can see this as potential conflict, or you can see this as a gray area of compromise. And I think your example with your former colleague was perfect. It's like, okay, I need to change my approach, but I'm going to get everything out of her that I can, because she makes up for what I lack. And I would imagine, did you ever do more presenting or public speaking or things on her behalf that she didn't want to get in front of an audience for?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it can work both ways.
It definitely can. Yeah.
If you don't completely annoy the other person.
That's right. Yeah.
So you mentioned onboarding. Is there another time when you use like a somewhere in the employee life cycle where it's like, okay, now it's time to look at this again? Or when else does it come up for next move?
Yeah, we've had folks request it prior to things like performance evaluations, before coaching opportunities, things like that. I think that's an opportunity for us, and probably for a lot of organizations, to integrate it more into the employee life cycle. It's always available. I remind folks that it's there, share it with folks a lot, but we use it a lot at the very beginning. And because our organization has grown so much so quickly, we've used it a lot. I mean, we have groups of new employees coming in every month and a half, couple of months. And so new groups of folks are getting exposed to it all the time. Like I said, some folks get really excited about it and use it more frequently, but I get really, really good feedback about using it at the orientation stage.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting way to get to know one another, to get to know the organization. I think it creates some camaraderie and kind of a bond too between the folks who go through and share about themselves and their profiles together.
And DISC is fun. It's something that you can make fun of other people, but in a fun way, and make fun of yourself, because this is one where there's not a right or wrong. It's just this is how I approach this. It's probably going to drive you crazy. I'm like, absolutely, that would.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I really enjoy that part of it.
So on an aside note, as a client, did you know that you can make like a shortened version of the report?
No.
And I'll teach you how to do this offline, but like I make a manager's report. So the manager's report has the person's disc graph, and then like how to communicate, and ideal environment, or ways to manage. Like you can pick out just a couple of pages and just give that manager 3 or 4 pages instead of the whole thing, because then they can pull that out before they do their one-on-ones and things like that. So when we hang up, we'll get back online and I'll teach you how to do that. But yeah, it is, you're right. That big report is overwhelming, but you can create a custom report and use it however you want to, which is fantastic.
And we've had a couple of folks step into leadership positions where they were leading a department, and a department of people that already existed. And in that case, I was like, they wanted the full report of everybody. And I was like, if it were me, I would want everyone's full report. I would want to really dig in as I'm getting to know folks who are already here. So people are using that. It's just less common.
For your high Ds though, a little quick reminder.
Yeah.
Is exactly. Good. Yeah. Now, you mentioned, we don't need to go deep into this, but you mentioned that you use the driving forces as well. And I don't think we have talked a lot about that this season on DISCY Chicks, but if you look at season 2, we go way into the driving forces. And as a refresher to the audience, the driving forces is another assessment that's often given with the DISC. And it is more why you do what you do, where DISC is how you do what you do. And it's a little more complicated because you don't wear it on your sleeve like you do DISC. You can't sit in a coffee shop and think, oh, that person's resourceful. So talk a little bit about your use of the driving forces, if you will.
training agenda that I use, the training session I facilitate, is about half and half, honestly. About half of it is DISC and about half of it is driving forces. And I really like the driving forces because we do have such a predominance of high I, high S at next move, but our driving forces are more equally distributed. It's a good way to talk about, hey, you might do the same thing, but you may be doing it for a different reason. What I like a lot about the driving forces is the utility of it. I think it's a very practical, at least what gets kicked out in the report that we're able to use is really practical information. So we do an overview of what the 12 sort of styles are. I found a good description online that I like, particularly because some of the labels of the driving forces I think are very value heavy. You know, when we hear altruism we associate as a positive thing. And so is it resourceful that's on the other side?
It's intentional.
Intentional. So you may just, even though there's nothing wrong with intentionality, you may assume that if you're low in altruism and high in intentionality, that that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
So I try to be really clear and find tools that are really clear. Again, this is not good, bad, right, wrong. This is different. And I always use the example of, like, you might be volunteering, you know, a intentional person will volunteer, will participate in charity or philanthropy work. The reason for doing it will be because they see some particular outcome that has benefit to their home, their community, their family, etc., rather than a high altruism person who just does it because it feels good, because it's something they like and will do almost anything. I meant, like, my altruism score is like 98 or something bananas like that. Most of my career has been spent in the nonprofit field. That's probably not a surprise. But I talk about that so that people sort of understand it. It's not somebody's a good person and somebody's a selfish person. That's not how that works. But I think that's really helpful. And we talk specifically about the strengths and the weaknesses section and the energizers and the stressors. And so on strengths and weaknesses, and we call this out in the DISC section as well, the value to the organization piece particularly. I always tell folks, I know you're going to retire at next move, but if you ever have to take another position or you're working on a promotion or something, this is where you start when you are preparing for your interview, when you're writing your resume, when you're getting ready to go make your ask. You're able to look at those things and say, hey, this is the value that I bring to the organization. These are my strengths, without even trying. This doesn't have anything to do with my education or my experience or my position. This is just who I am and what you're going to get with me when I join your organization. And I think that's so valuable and so empowering.
Absolutely.
For an employee. The energizers and the stressors, I also talk a lot about through the lens of, this is how you make your own best workplace. This is how you make sure that you are having your best experience at work. So if you're having a series of bad days and it's not just a busy season or a busy time and you're really starting to feel that stress, this page is, again, the first place that I would start to ask myself, how much of my day-to-day allows exposure to the things that energize me? How much of my work life includes these things? And conversely, how much am I dealing with stressors day in and day out? And again, when you're interviewing or when you are evaluating a workplace, does this culture, does this leadership team, do these colleagues, does this boss seem like the kind of person who's going to value the things that energize me, value my strengths, value the things that motivate me? Or am I going to be rubbing up against the things that stress me out or sap my energy? And I'm curious, I haven't really thought about this before, but my sense of the DISC of the sort of what we do is that a pivot there is fairly straightforward. You know, I can be a better listener and less of a talker. I can take the extra time to focus on a little bit more detail. I can help someone bring out big picture. Driving forces feel a little bit more static to me. Like, these sort of are what they are. And if you've got to rub up against too much,
Yeah.
with a driving force that does not energize you or motivate you, that might be a situation that you need to kind of navigate yourself out of or around.
Well,
Would that be fair to say?
yeah, I would agree. And what we say is that people are going to have those driving forces met,
Mhm.
but we want them to meet them at work.
Ah,
You know,
yes.
if it's very harmonious and you work in a chaotic environment, you can do that, but then you're going to go home and paint or sit in the woods or meditate. You know, if you can lessen that chaos at work and find some kind of balance, whether it's taking time to meditate or what
Right.
shutting the door or having a beautiful view, that
Mhm.
can you try to start meeting that things there. So you're going to find it. And when you come home from the day and you say you've had a great day,
Mhm.
one of your top 4 has been met for sure.
So another piece of my job, the way that DISC has fit into my job so far is that my role at Next Move is people and culture. And so another thing that I do early on with our new hires is just have this people and culture conversation where I'm mostly introducing them to who I am and why I'm there and what my job is. And one of the things I talk about is my mission at work, or sort of why I do what I do. And a lot of it is what I mentioned about when I was at the youth nonprofit, is that when I worked in nonprofits, we don't have a lot of resources. You don't have a lot of money to attract and retain talent. And the way in which I operated, the way in which I overcome that was by creating a workplace that was really rewarding. I talked about my goal was to create a workplace where you got as much as you gave.
Right.
And my goal in workplaces and for myself is work-life integration, where I think work-life balance is a little bit of an urban legend. I don't know that balance is really super possible. But I think work-life integration is completely possible. And it's what you were talking about. Like, am I getting my needs met at work? Or am I getting my needs met sort of in a diverse way? Is it that I get sucked dry at work and I have to go home and try to replenish over and over again? Or does the work that I do in my career fill me up and energize me and equip me to go out and do the work that I do in my home, in my family, in my community, in my church or my civic group or my Rotary Club or whatever it is, and vice versa? Am I out in the community? Am I with my family, in my friendships, relationships? And am I learning things from people and experiences there that equip me at work to do that work better? That's my goal. And I think again, the DISC and the driving forces is a really good way to try to meet that or create that for ourselves. Next Move is a new company. You know, we are just about 3 years old. We are growing really quickly, but we are still startup sort of in terms of the processes and things like that. And so as I am talking to new employees, I am constantly reminding them and constantly inviting them to be a creator of their own positive experience,
Yeah.
asking for feedback, reminding them that these are tools that they can use, because we don't have a perfect invitation ready for them. It's not perfectly set. And very few workplaces, no matter how well established they are, have it all figured out. And so,
And
again,
it's
I think,
different for each person, what
right.
rewards them. So I popped up your top 4 driving forces. So, Professor Cindy, 96 altruistic. So what I tell people when we go over their driving forces is that, this is how passionate you are about this.
Mhm.
As you know, that 33%, this is where the rest of the world is, the people who've taken this. And so you are not only you're not only not within the first standard deviation above the mean, but way out here. And
Yeah.
so I'll joke, this is either how passionate you are or how annoying you are to other people
That is what I
about
say.
this.
This is how you annoy other people. If you have an extreme, this is why you're annoying to other people.
Yeah, always trying to give and be helpful and supportive. And so it's really important to know that about yourself, just like you said, that some people are a little more focused on who they want to give their help to. And one of my favorite examples is of the difference between intentional and altruistic is give Amanda fish, and intentional is teach Amanda fish. They're still giving of their time, but they want to see something come back for that. They don't treat everybody the exact same. And that helps people understand, So selfless, this is the other one that has wacky language. This is the one that's different. The opposite of this is resourceful. Always wanting an exchange on your investment of time, trying to make things bigger, faster, stronger. Where selfless is just kind of wanting to do the thing without those constraints. It needs to be done, and I want to do it from start to finish. I don't want to be timed. I don't want to see how much money I can save. I just want to start and complete this task because it's the next thing that needs to be done, or the best thing that needs to be done. Right. So, all right, let me get out of here. We'll talk about this all day, so we have to stop doing this. But
I like this because I think, again, so the last one, just to quickly revisit that, the last one is intellectual. And so I like to use that because I'm like, you might not think that somebody who is so people focused, so relational, loves new stuff, loves starting things, loves the challenge, the change, would have this high, like, I love to just learn for the sake of learning. Like, I'm fascinated by that stuff. And so I think it adds depth, it adds character, and it allows, one of the things that I always talk about, I sort of round out our training by trying to make some connections. I always invite them. What connections do you see? How do you see your greatest strengths contributing to your weaknesses? Where has this shown up for you? Where is this sticky? Where do you get in trouble? One of the questions that I've recently added that I love is, so we go through the report and we call out characteristics that really stand out to us. So I pick, 6 or 8 pages and say, okay, read over these results and call out what stands out to you. Either what are you really proud of? What do you think is really important? What are you still struggling with? What feels like your biggest barrier, etc. And I write it up on this whiteboard. And so we start to get this list of traits built up. And so I ask people, looking at what you see on this board, what is standing out to you? A question I've recently started asking is, what feedback do you really want from your colleagues based on what you see here? And I always use myself as an example. A lot of my potential weaknesses or the ways that I'm perceived by others during times of stress is as a poor listener. And I'm obviously very talkative. I don't have any problem with that at all. But being a listener is really important to me. And so that's one that I offer as, if you're experiencing me as being a poor listener or talking over people, it's very meaningful for me if you would tell me that. So I think that's a really good tool as well. An opportunity for feedback from others, because there are things that we are not so great at that are important, that we care a lot about getting better at. Not all of it. Like, I'm never going to be a super detail oriented person. I'm not trying to be an accountant. That's not going to happen. If I make a miss on a calculation or a financial thing, like, I don't want to get
a lot of sleep over it.
Yeah. But because relationships are important to me, the way that I show up in relationship matters. And so if some of my other traits are making that difficult, I want to know. The other thing that I always ask people is, these are not comprehensive report. This doesn't say everything about who you are as a person. Not everything is captured here. So what is something that's important to you that you want people to know? And I always share that I love K-pop. I'm a huge K-pop fan. So I'm like, what's even just a silly thing? And so that gives people a chance to talk about, like, oh, well, I really love being outdoors, or I spend time with my kids, or whatever. And so I like making sure that people know, like, this is a piece of who you are. This is some of who you are. It's not fully, encapsulates everything. I haven't had a lot of people, I think because I have a lot of high S and a lot of high I in my organization, I haven't had a lot of people who are like, I don't believe this. This isn't for me. Yeah. In the last organization that I worked for, I had she was, I think, fairly high D. And she was like, I don't like being put in boxes. This isn't for me. She was so resistant to the whole thing. I don't experience a lot of that, but I do try to sort of build in, like, right. I'm not trying to tell you who you are as a person. This is a tool that can help you.
It's not a crystal ball. It helps guide it. Your story will help set a framework for how this stuff fits in. Well, this has been awesome, Amanda. I really appreciate your time. Your insight has been wonderful. And I look forward to getting this posted. I'll send you all the information. We can spread it out. But And again, we can regroup and we can talk about that secret report that I told you about, because you can get back in there and wheel and deal and come up with all kinds of things that make the report what you want it.
Awesome.
So perfect. All right. Well, Martha, sorry we missed you this time, but she's gonna love hearing this and she's gonna hate missing it. But have a great rest of the year. We're recording in December. This will probably get published either the last week of December or right at the beginning of January, but I'll let you know. But it was a pleasure speaking with you, and keep up the good work at Next Move.
Yes, thanks for all your support.
All right. We'll talk to you later.